time on the channel. And so it's a interesting discussion we're about to have. And I'm fresh off a little wrist that's still strained. And it's this muscle called I believe it's called the extensor carpi ulnaris. Again, guys, you don't have to remember that. But for a guy
Mhm.
that has inflammation here, he's going to remember that. But anyways, the reason I use this as a segue is Ryan and I are going to talk about body image, workout, all this stuff that I think I don't want to say it's gotten distorted in the modern world, but there's definitely a lot of misinformation slash lack of information. And Ryan bodybuilds on the side. So Ryan's a good guest, especially he's a martial artist and a bodybuilder. So anyways, welcome, Ryan.
Nice to be here.
Yeah. So Ryan, how long have you been bodybuilding?
I've been lifting since I was like 15, but I actually started with calisthenics, and I think it's a good carryover because of the push-ups and all of that. It carries over more to being a martial artist than just bench pressing or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And what got you into the calisthenics? Was it just something natural that occurred with your training, or did you sort of take a separate interest in it outside of the dojo?
I mean, it was partially due to the fact that there was no training during COVID, so everyone did calisthenics at the time. And before that, even I did calisthenics because it was just part of the training that you would do at the martial arts gym. So it was just a natural segue.
I see. And how did you find the right exercises slash the right information for yourself?
I mean, I mostly taught myself online and stuff, but it was a mix between my Sifu teaching me like what I should be doing in order to exercise properly, and then just learning online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There were so many researchers during COVID that you could just pick and choose, and you could just choose which ones you wanted, preferably for what goals you had.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And that kind of leads to another segue from another angle thinking about this because I had a Russian friend back right after I graduated college who worked out a lot. He was big. But
Hmm.
one time we were goofing around, he was trying to swing punches at me, and the dude
Oh.
was weighed down by his weight, by his mass, because
Hmm.
he didn't know how to punch. He never trained boxing. So the only thing it did, all that weight, all that muscle was made him punch slower and sloppier and worse. So
Yeah.
I think that's another kind of good discussion point we could potentially explore because obviously if you weight train or you do calisthenics without this end goal of getting better at martial arts, it might
Mhm.
actually backfire.
Yeah, it 100% backfires. Like we talk about the Bradley Martins of the world. When you try to see him throw a punch, it's disgusting. Especially if you abuse steroids or whatever. Like it's in pursuit of looking better, but it makes you look worse in a fighting perspective.
Yeah. And I think that is actually the perfect segue to in general about looking good versus kind of feeling good versus being functional, right? And I think that's something. And Ryan, you know more about this than I do, but I was mentioning this to Ryan, and that's why we decided to even have this discussion. But if you look at like the strong men from back in the day, especially the black and white pictures and stuff, they looked very different than they look now.
Hmm.
And so I think that's something that we should definitely talk about. And I guess even nowadays, like the true power lifters look very different than like the sculpted kind of bodybuilders, right? So yeah, please,
Hmm.
whatever you have to add to this.
Well, in large part, that's one due to steroids, but two, it's also due to something normal people don't usually take a look at, which is the changing of the rules. Back in the golden age of bodybuilding, for example, we see Arnold. He looks very different than the modern bodybuilder because the modern bodybuilder has to have a leaner body mass. In today's world, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he would never be able to have on stage leanness like any of the guys nowadays. Chris Bumstead, for example, who just won the Mr. Olympia in Classic, which is the thing most similar to modern Golden Age bodybuilding. You have to be way leaner than you did in the Golden Age of bodybuilding. On the topic of
Wow.
the strongmen had completely different lifts. There was a guy who was also in a Mr. Olympia, uh, Colombo, who was Arnold Schwarzenegger's training partner, who was my height, 5'5", and he won the world's strongest man because the events were completely different. Nowadays, if you want to win the world's strongest man, you have to be at least 6 foot, at least. Like I think
What?
everyone was, yeah, I think everyone was at least 6'2" in the past world's strongest man. Like all of these events require you to be tall. It's completely different.
Wow.
Hmm.
And for those of us unfamiliar, why is it now that you have to be a certain height? What exercise made it so, let's say, a slightly shorter than average person couldn't win it anymore?
Well, for example, a bunch of the carries, right? Let's just take a regular farmer's carry, which is when you take two bars and then you hold it and then you carry it from a further distance, right? If you have shorter legs, you're not going to be able to carry as far, number one. And then number two, typically, like for a deadlift, it'd be better to be shorter, right? But if you're not as tall, then you don't have enough frame in order to put on enough muscle in order to lift the most amount of weight, for example. Like Hafthor and Eddie Hall are the guys who hold the world record for deadlift. It's debatable who holds it, but Eddie Hall
Wow.
is I think 6'2" or something like that, and Hafthor is much taller than that even.
I see. I see what you mean. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I'm not too familiar with the world's strongest man, but I'm just looking at some of the things they compete, right? A lot of it's like a pull or a carry or something like that. Yeah, I never thought about it until you mentioned it. If I'm taller, I just naturally have a bigger stride, a bigger pace. That's so kind of unfair a little bit. Wow. Yeah, I'm just looking at this right now. Wow. Oh, hello, Ryan. Uh-oh. Looks
You're
like
cutting off a little bit.
yeah, exactly. It looks like unfortunately one
You're
of
cutting
us,
off a little bit.
yeah, one of us isn't being recorded. So hopefully it comes back. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Ryan? Oh man, let's see. How do we? Oh, I can edit your mic
Kind
settings.
of.
Let's see. What if I get rid of this?
Yes. What's up?
I
Your
got rid
camera's a
of
little glitchy.
echo. I got rid of your echo cancellation. So hopefully that works. Can you still hear me? It's a little delayed
Yeah.
on
What's
your
up?
part. It looks like, unfortunately. Darn. Um, can you
You were
still hear me,
talking about
Ryan?
some of the exercises that they do between a pull. Yeah. What's up?
Oh,
Can you hear me?
okay. Yeah. Let me see if I get rid of automatic adjust volume. Okay, let's. Hopefully that works. Yeah. So before there was technical issues, I was just talking about. I was looking at some of the things you were telling me about. Some of the competitions, right? Lots of pulling, lots of different types of carry. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like you said, if you're taller, you got a bigger stride. So
Mm-hmm.
that's I didn't realize how unfair it is.
Yeah. The other
Hmm.
thing is too, though, if you compare like a strongman's training to like a modern bodybuilders, the old bodybuilders used to use a lot more free weight exercises. For example,
Hmm.
pull-ups, bench press, overhead press, and even the farmer's carries that you see in modern strongman, right? But nowadays, these bodybuilders are just training for a physique to look good, right? And they actually prioritize more stable movements. For example, machine, right? Instead of doing an overhead press, they'll do a shoulder machine, right? They'll do a overhead machine press here. And what that does is number one, with the machines, it's already built to leverage into your body strength, and it doesn't give you the stability that's required out of everyday movements, right? If you go to pick up something off the ground, it requires stability. If you go to push something over your head, it requires stability. That's why the modern strongmen are much better at any other sport that they carry into. Like you have the Eddie Halls who on transition to MMA. Of course, they still have the said problems. Why? Because with the difference between calisthenics and a lot of weightlifting movements, let's take the bench press versus the push up, right? The bench press, your shoulders are retracted the entire time during the lift so that you can engage the chest, right? With a push up, when you push, you have scapular retraction and protraction, which is the same thing on the edge when you throw a punch, right? That has about, I would say, like 30% of the power of the punch. Without it, then you end up with this stiff movement, which you see from like the bodybuilders that are like punching like this with no scapular retraction.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, I hear echo now. I hear an echo. Do you have headphones by chance? That could be what's going
uh,
on.
yeah, I do have
Yeah,
headphones.
that might
Here.
help. So it's I don't know what software they use with the live stream, but um,
Mm.
it's something they've never fixed.
It's all good.
Yeah. If you asked me 2 years ago, I would have known what the technology was
Is
everyone,
making it better?
whether it's StreamYard or Google Live or Zoom, they all use the same technology. They just rebrand it differently, add a few add-ons, and then charge money. Anyways, yeah, hopefully this is better. Now I don't hear myself, so
All
let's
right,
see.
cool.
Cool. Yeah. So when you started bodybuilding, who did you follow?
Who did I follow? I actually followed this guy, Alex Leonidas, who also trains the calisthenics, who also trains the weightlifting, who also does the cardio and the like. I try to follow people like that because they had more similar goals to me. I followed guys who were pure bodybuilders like Greg Doucette, for example, just to get information out of them. Training that I want to do. I try to
I
follow
see.
guys who have similar goals to me. Like even a Gabriel Varga, I would take over a Greg Doucette
Mhm.
in terms of training value for like a lifting.
I see.
Yeah, that's Alex Leonidas right there.
Cool. This is
And yeah,
cool. There's
first
a
thing that comes up is a weighted dip, which is a calisthenics movement.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Wow, look at that. Look at just like you said, the stabilizer muscles, man. So important. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I learned it the hard way. I didn't realize that my wrists
And the
were
cool
so
thing about Alex
vulnerable.
Leonidas too is that he yeah
Keep going,
yeah the
keep going.
wrists
There's a
are
delay,
important. Like so
unfortunately, with
many roided up
technology. So
bodybuilders
for
that'll
those of you
hurt
watching,
their
really
joints, their
apologies about
ligaments,
this.
their
Next time I'm going to
shoulders.
use Zoom because I didn't know StreamYard could be giving us these issues. Like there's a big delay, like between what I say and what Ryan hears, and probably vice versa. So unfortunately, apologies about that. I never knew that would happen with StreamYard. But so next time we're going to use Zoom. But anyways, keep going, Ryan.
Mm. Uh, as I was saying about the Alex Leonidas, the cool thing I like to follow is if they're natural or not, right? Because if they have roids or whatever, then they'll have a different body shape than you can even achieve ever in your life. And it's another thing too that these guys who are fitness influencers or whatever, they have elite genetics, and that's just as a result of what they pick out in the Instagram posts or whatever. Like you're never gonna achieve what they look like, even if you did steroids, right? Because they have elite genetics. With Alex Leonidas, he tells you this flat out, and he tells you that he's natural, and he's not lying about it. Half of these Instagram influencers, fitness influencers, they're on gear and they're lying about it.
The example comes back to mind with Liver King, right? Liver King was the
Oh
perfect
god.
example of I don't know, did you ever follow that guy?
I I not on purpose. He just appeared everywhere on my feed for no reason because I he, people decide to watch him for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. So for you, what is your ultimate goal with bodybuilding?
Um, for me, the bodybuilding I took more interest in after I got injured and the like, and I found that resistance training in general just helps my body heal. And then number two, I know people often say that size and strength don't matter in a fight. They do, but only when the skill level is the same. So if I want to fight somebody who is my size, my strength in a weight class, then I'd rather be stronger and bigger than them, you know? And bodybuilding does give you an advantage in that respect, as well as prevent injuries to a degree. But it's nowhere near the amount that learning how to fight would do. 1 hour spent learning how to fight is probably worth more to being able to fight than a week of bodybuilding, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So, what is your regimen like usually? For example,
Hello?
do you bodybuild every other day and train martial arts every day, or do you martial arts every other day and bodybuild every other day? Tell me about that.
Um, Frequency and the amount I train per week changes depending on what I'm doing. I like to say that you can have everything, just not all at once. Right. So if I'm training bodybuilding and martial arts every day, then I'm definitely overtraining. I'm not going to get any of my goals in either of those two things. So I have training blocks whereby I focus on bodybuilding, powerlifting, Olympic lifting, whatever. And then I have training blocks where I focus on martial arts. Right now, I'm barely lifting at all because I am training for a tournament coming up in Sanda. And for that, it's mostly fast twitch, for which I need less lifting and more martial arts. And in that case, I would want less static strength, which is bodybuilding, and more dynamic strength, which is your box jumps, your Olympic lifts, the like.
I see.
I
Yeah.
train lifting. Yeah, I train lifting about 3 days a week right now, and it's not even like your standard bodybuilding training. It's more box jumps. It's more Olympic lifting. It's more calisthenics and stuff like that.
And with the Sanda tournament, by the way, guys, I might go support Ryan, so I'll keep you guys all posted on that. But with the Sanda tournament, is this this Sanda tournament, does it have like takedowns and throws?
Yes, of course. Every Sunday tournament has takedowns and throws, but I the thing is with Sanda specifically, and all Sanda rule sets is you have about 3 to 5 seconds in the clinch to do the takedown, so you have to be fast with it. And I think that's actually a lot better than other styles because what that lets you do is you get the takedown immediately. So in a real life situation, you're not tied up with a person for like 20 minutes trying to get a takedown while the other guy comes around and stabs you in the back or whatever.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is because I'm thinking about picturing what you're training calisthenic or bodybuilding wise, and you basically have to cater it towards that too if you're the type of Sanda fighter that is going to go for the takedowns and the throws and stuff like that.
hmm I wrestled before also in high school, so I have a bit of a background in the wrestling department. But fighting, like all these jiu-jitsu guys say that, oh, I'm going to take down the striker easily, right? But being able to take someone down in a striking situation is completely different than taking someone down from a grappling position. And the jiu-jitsu guys don't know how to wrestle either, so
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. So
Mm.
this is a little segue that this was another kind of little discussion point that Ryan and I were talking about off camera, just about a lot of times, for example, and Ryan mentioned this in the beginning of this talk about sort of genetics, right? Some people are just naturally born with wider shoulders. Some people naturally born with
hmm
more of a V figure. And as people who were in this digital information algorithm age, we have to understand that. And Ryan mentioned earlier, some people just have those genes. Like some bodybuilders just have those genes. Like I'm the type of guy, I just naturally have high metabolism, even in my 30s. So if I wanted to
hmm
really bulk up, it's going to be hard. I'm not saying it's impossible or nothing's impossible, but I have to understand the realities of it. But I also say that because, like, you know, especially sometimes whether I'm injured or I'm like not in the mood, I don't work out too much, but I naturally stay lean. And people, they're like, Jay, how do you do it? I'm like, it's just unfortunately my genetics. And so people are like, Jay, how do you get the six pack? I'm like, I just have a six pack. And we like have to understand that everyone's different, right? So that's another reason you just can't compare yourself, especially to those people online. You don't know what their genetics are. You don't know if they're on roids, like Ryan said. You don't know what their training regimen is. So, yeah, a little PSA, a little, I guess you can call it a little chicken soup for everyone. Just work at your own pace. If you're getting better every day, that's all that matters.
100%, man. I think that when we're talking about the V shape, we call it a V taper typically in the bodybuilding community. Like we naturally will have that V taper because we have a smaller waist or wider shoulders or the like, or because we're leaner and the like. I think that it's important to say that, like you said, nothing is impossible, but it's also good to cater to your own goals and understand how difficult it is to get to that point. And working hard for it, despite having bad genetics, I applaud you. I don't have the best genetics. I have a slower metabolism for getting lean, but I still want to aim for that goal because that's what are the needs of my goals and my competition. I have to get lean in order to make weight, for example. But if that's not in your playing cards, if you don't want to get lean, you don't want to get small, you don't want a small waist, whatever, then you shouldn't strive for that.
So that opens up a great discussion point too. So let's talk about making weight. So for you, is making weight
hmm
sometimes a challenge, or is it usually you have your own process down?
everyone hates making weight. If you have to make weight, you hate it, right? Unless you barely cut any weight, it's horrible every single time. Like less eating, like the water cut is horrible. Like right now, if I stepped on the scale, I might be 150 pounds, but the weight I have to make is 132 pounds, and I have about a month to do that, right? And you can cut like up to 20 pounds of water, but like that's just so unhealthy. I'm gonna be around 140 before my competition, and I'm gonna cut about 8 pounds of water, and that would be around healthy for me. It's horrible every single time. Everyone hates it, but the way fighters do it, I think it's more healthy than the way that bodybuilders do it, because the way fighters do it, they have to maintain their performance through the weight cut, versus the bodybuilders, they have to get leaner and leaner and leaner and leaner and cut the water. So, in my opinion, the way fighters do it is a little healthier. Ideally, it would be everyone doing the one championship thing and testing hydration as well. So, that would be ideal, but that's not the reality of the situation.
And that's something I didn't even know about bodybuilding competitions. I didn't know they have like a weight they had to make. That's interesting.
They do have a weight they have to make. In addition to that, in order to be stage lean, which is like sub 10% body fat at the very minimum, you have to make so much changes to your diet in addition to cutting water so you look more dehydrated, and then you refuel and carb up for the day of the competition.
Guys, I'm learning so much from Ryan. Again, Ryan, so happy to have this conversation with you, but that just sounds very unhealthy. It sounds I thought the whole point of bodybuilding
Yeah.
was like making your body the best, but the stage, the stage aesthetics force you to do certain things unhealthy. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, getting to sub 10% body fat in general is extremely unhealthy. I mean, doing the fighter cut is extremely unhealthy. And as a fighter, I can't really hate on bodybuilders for doing stuff that's unhealthy for their sport, because guess what? Getting punched in the face is also unhealthy for your sport, and it's unhealthy for your brain. I can't really hate on that per se, but I think fighting at least is in pursuit of a goal that has function, and ultimately you can defend yourself in real life. Bodybuilding, to me, is a little bit more of a vain goal, which is to look a certain way. Like, for example, having a smaller waist. If you train your obliques, which is one of the key components and core muscles that you use to generate power for a punch, for example, then you might look worse in a bodybuilding competition because your waist looks bigger.
Yeah.
To me, being vain and having function are opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The often thing that you hear, not from a stage perspective, but from a camera perspective, is that the camera adds 20 pounds, right? So I can only imagine in the modern day when so much stuff is televised and filmed with a camera, potentially for a bodybuilder or someone entering those competitions, now they have to care about what the camera picks up too. So like that's like double reason for them to do the weight cut and all this stuff I didn't even know about.
Yeah, and nowadays everything's on social media. They can put everything on social media. They can control the lighting. They can control this, control that. Not only do you have to be an expert in lifting, well, in building muscle via lifting weights. Some bodybuilders suck at lifting weights, but not only do you have to be an expert at bodybuilding, putting on that muscle, you have to be an expert in camera lighting. You have to be an expert in camera work. You have to be an expert at angles. You have to be an expert at posing first and foremost, and the way that the camera is filmed in modern bodybuilding competitions versus old school bodybuilding competitions is the downlighting. A lot of the times in modern bodybuilding competitions, they don't have lighting that goes straight down, which brings out the cuts in your muscles. So even then, you're not seeing like the perfect build, which is why they have to get even leaner than the old guys did.
Wow. Yeah. Downlighting, like you said, and of course lighting coming from right below are the worst aesthetically, right? That's crazy. The light is coming from here. Oh no.
Yeah, downlighting for bodybuilding is the best actually because it brings out every single cut in your muscles. What you don't want is light coming from all angles because then the light shines and it hides the cuts on your muscles. If it's coming this way, then you don't see the cuts as well as if it's coming down this way and you can see the cuts in the muscles.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. See, like,
So
that's why lighting is such an art and a science, and people take courses in it because depending on the situation, it works wonders for whatever your goal is.
yeah, exactly. Like next time you want to post an Instagram picture of your six pack, then downlighting right down, then it looks way better than as opposed to something else. It's the same reason why bathrooms have downlighting.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, if people are always look at themselves in the bathroom, right? The downlighting's good. That's so funny.
Exactly. Yeah. It applies to everything that, I mean, say makeup or whatever. Even though it seems vain, the downlighting is something that's a key component in everyone's life if they go to the bathroom, I'd hope.
Yeah, yeah. And then from a makeup perspective, especially aesthetically for the ladies, if in downlighting their makeup can make them look good, then that means in regular soft lighting they're going to look really good.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So this is a perfect segue. This is the other thing I ranted about to Ryan, and this is something I'm sure, being also Asian American, you have things to say, but we come from cultures, especially the East Asian culture. There is just some very unhealthy beauty standards, right? So this is going beyond just body image or fitness, but just in general, a lot of East Asian culture has a lot of unhealthy beauty standards. Both Ryan and I have very sharp jaws, right? And even that in East Asian culture is not considered attractive in a guy. So I know it's changing a little now, but both of us with our jaws would probably criticize. They'd be like, "Why are you so skinny? Why are you not eating?" It's like, that's not what it means. It just means, one, we either chew a lot of stuff or we're just very, very, it's genetics. Like, we just have these jaw lines. It's like, but there's certain things that in the East, they misattribute to lifestyle when it should actually be explained by your genetics. Like, I mean, I don't know, I was a mouth breather for many years, so that might have contributed to the certain way my jaw and my face look. But at the end of the day, like, my dad has a sharp jawline too, and I inherited his jaw. So no matter how good, if I nose breathe and I, perfectly took care of my teeth and whatever, I would have still had a jawline like this. And so, like, this is just one example, but we can go into a lot of examples. But so I guess I'll open up to you, Ryan. Have you ever dealt with these, like, weird East Asian beauty standards, or East Asian body image fitness standards?
Actually, oddly enough, it was my mom's birthday a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, "Hey, oh, your arm too big." And I was thinking to myself, huh, everyone else in the West says my arm is too skinny, and then meanwhile, my mom, who comes from a Chinese background, she's from Guangzhou, she says my arm is too big, and I'm like, interesting take. And on the other end, something completely controlled by genetics for the most part. Which also has to do with lifestyle, skin color. Like, they want you to be completely pale and white. I live in Arizona, as you know. It's impossible to be pale in Arizona. Like, the sun is so bright every single day. It's up at 5 a.m.
Exactly. The pale thing, man, is so resonates because most people in our modern lifestyle have vitamin D deficiency already, even white people. Mm-hmm. And for Asians, because our skins are a little lighter, but we can tan, that makes us very susceptible to being vitamin D deficient. Because if we're around the same skin tone as a white person, but we spend the same amount of time in the sun, we don't absorb as much vitamin D. So it's like especially harmful for the East Asian beauty standard of really liking pale, because it creates so much vitamin D deficiency in East Asians. And right now I've just accepted that I need to take supplements. But for 2 years, a few years ago, I was just always in the sun and just building up the tan, right? And then I would always get criticized. It's like, not only are you skinny now, Jerry, you're also too dark. It's like, you guys go F yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. there's too many things. Like Asian Americans will always call you not Asian enough, or international Asians will always call you not Asian enough. Yet the other problem is that all of these people from international countries, they all have these terrible beauty standards. But in the West, we have the reverse problem, right? Like in bodybuilding, oddly enough, darker skin is better because it shows the cuts more. And like you see all that terrible bodybuilder fake tan that everyone gets. It's horrible. It's disgusting. But that fake tan brings out the muscles, makes it look wider, and it doesn't make you washed out by a bright light. So if you have downlighting coming down, then you want the bright light to not drain out all your muscles and not like clear out everything, not wash everything out, and instead bring it out, which was where the fake tan comes in. And having bigger muscles is the preference, obviously, versus in East Asia, having smaller muscles is the preference.
Yeah, even just regular models, so not bodybuilders, but regular models before they walk on the, I think it's called the catwalk. Before they walk on the catwalk, they put on the tan too. Like it's like a very subtle shaded tan. So for people not looking for it, they wouldn't see it. But it's exactly what Ryan said. It's to make them not washed out with the top light, and for men, it's also to make them their muscles look more cut. So there's just all these things until you interact with people who are into these like beauty or whatever image conscious industries, you don't realize that it's all a presentation. So that's why it's important for people to get educated on that, so you don't compare yourself to any of that.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like you said about the models, not only do they have the fake tan, not only do they need this uh, special look, it's a presentation. And if the presentation is via photo, then they can even Photoshop it. So you might be comparing to yourself a body that doesn't even exist in real life.
Yeah, and since we mostly have been talking about men, but I'll just very briefly segue into women, and if we want to flow with that, we can do too. So I have a neighbor who used to model professionally, and she told me at least the post, maybe you could call it like the post 90s type of model, the really tall, skinny, like lean, like, like you're like, what kind of body type? It's almost like that Barbie body type, right? The reason the industry uses women like that is because the whole point is they don't actually want you looking at the woman's beauty. They want the women to represent the clothes, right? That's what the modeling is. It's to show off the clothes. So why? And so if you guys think about what I'm saying, now follow the logic. If it's about the clothes, what do clothes usually get presented in? Like a clothing rack, or like a, like something like this, right? So you want the models to look like this. You want them to look like a clothing rack. So if you think about that, it's like, oh, that's why these women look like that. So they're not even trying to make the women look beautiful. The women just have to make the clothes stand out. And it's something,
Yeah,
before I talked to my neighbor, I didn't realize. I was like, oh, so like people who try to envy or emulate that type of look are like, oh my God, that's the beauty standard. No, that's not the beauty standard. That is the runway standard, to make the clothes stand out. Because it's like, oh, what if it's hanging in a store on a rack? That's what you're trying to emulate. But like, so for some reason, like that look became like, oh, you got to aspire to that. And then like, yeah, like having the long legs and the slender body of being 6'2". Yeah, like have women aspire to that. And of course, unfortunately, the counter, when the tide shifts, it's like now it's like, oh yeah, just like people can be 300 pounds in models, right? That's the problem when you go too extreme into anything.
And it's dangerously unhealthy, especially with 300-pound thing. I never knew that about runway modeling. That's very interesting. I think that loads of things like that, like making the clothes look better, making the lighting look better, making X, Y, and Z look better. These societal shifts, they can change and impact how the beauty standard is perceived. And it might not even be based on something like traditionally, oh, you have wider hips, therefore it's more attractive because then you can have a kid, right? It might not even be something like that. It might be because, oh, the clothes are longer, so you want to have a taller person. Or, oh, the lighting looks like this, so you want to have darker skin. Or, oh, in East Asian countries, having paler skin means that you didn't work in a farm or whatever, which means you have more money, right? These small societal shifts can change like that. and it can completely change in the opposite direction. 300-pound women to become models instead. Like, all of these things are inherently superficial, and by that virtue, it means that it can change on a dime, which means it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And continuing on the East Asian standard, like we already sort of talked about, they don't necessarily like people who work out too much either. Because again, there's all this perception. Oh, if people work out, I'm sure you've heard this term, 四肢发达, right? It's like, oh, if their four limbs are very, very good, that means the blood's not going up here, right? Or the effort's not going up here. So the issue with them sort of looking down on people who, let's say, are really serious about training their bodies is then if you also expect people to be lean and not overweight, then unfortunately, this happens a lot more with East Asian women than men, is that, let's say the women do need to lose weight, whether because health-wise they need to or because of just arbitrary standards set by their parents or grandparents or society, a lot of times they'll just 节食, right? They'll just like eat less. Instead of, because they're not supposed to work out too much, so it's like, what else can I do? I guess I'll just eat less. And they're like, I always hear, especially back in the day when I worked at Bite Dance, right? So I had a lot of Chinese coworkers, and they were all like, "Oh my God, oh, I'm gonna see my mom in a few weeks. Oh, she's gonna criticize my weight. Okay, I gotta eat less now."
Yeah, that's horrible, man. Like, just to see your parents and the first thing they point out is like, "Oh, your weight bad," you know. And I think that's just a lack of communication that happens, because that's the only way to say that you care in Asian countries. You cut them fruit, or you tell them that you're not eating enough, or you're eating too much. You know, I think that's just genuinely part of the problem. I think other cultures too. Like, my girlfriend, she's Chinese too, and she danced and did gymnastics. Those two things are horrible for your body image. It's absolutely horrible. Like, being a wrestler, for example, like, it's horrible for your body image, right? The weight cutting sports in general, like, horrible for your body image, man. Yeah, I'm sure the women right before seeing their parents, the Chinese women, they eat just like a wrestler going for a weight cut. As soon as they see their parents, they're like, "Oh, I need to be this weight," you know. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you find that balance, right? Because obviously there's forces right now pulling us in different directions. And honestly, I don't have the answer, and that's why I wanted to bring Ryan on, because Ryan also likes to think about this stuff. But the key is obviously just my philosophy is keep learning about the body, right? No matter where the tide is turning or what the advice you're getting, at least keep learning about the body. So learn about the digestive system, learn about the endocrine system, learn about muscle skeletal system. And I think that at least gives you a little bit of your own knowledge, independent knowledge, to sort of look at what's going on and then make your own decisions and decide, okay, where do I keep learning from here?
My major is in kinesiology. I remember in the very beginning you were like the flexor carpi ulnaris, and I got flashbacks to my anatomy class and all that stuff. But I think learning about the body is extremely important. It's okay to not know all the answers. Like, no one knows all the answers. That's why we keep making these arbitrary beauty standards as a society. I think that the answer for yourself is going to be completely different than the answer for the person next to you. It's going to be completely different for your mom, your dad, depending on your age, your weight, anything. But I think first and foremost, it's good to be healthy, right? And part of that, sure, maybe it's body fat, body composition, right? But there's so much more than just the body fat. Like, for the Asian woman, maybe they do need to lose weight, sure. But the way they're going to do that is probably just not eating. And what happens then? You're going to lose muscle. You're going to not get enough micronutrients in your system. You're not going to have enough vitamins and minerals. All of these things will make you more unhealthy. And it might make you worse in body composition in the long run because you're doing those things. In addition to being healthy, I think that just having goals set for yourself and wanting to improve, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's important to compare yourself and have goals set to, instead of an arbitrary standard, one that you can continue to compare yourself to, that has similar genetics to, similar uses in hormones as you. For example, don't compare yourself to a steroid user, or if you're a woman, don't compare yourself to a man who has extra testosterone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And um, have you ever sustained any injuries from bodybuilding?
Oh, of course, like infinite. I think that bodybuilding is a way less risky endeavor in terms of injury than say fighting, for example. I think a lot of the injuries come mostly from the fact that they abuse steroids, which means that your ligaments don't catch up in strength to your muscles. But for me, a lot of the bodybuilding injuries that I've had are actually overuse injuries, and that also ties in with the calisthenics. Like I've had elbow tendonitis that was horrible just from lifting crazy amounts of weight, and between that and my shoulders being super stiff, it's affected my fighting as well.
Oh.
And a lot of the times it comes from bodybuilders shortening the range of motion, and because they want to build as much muscle as possible without the function, why do you need all of that range of motion? Instead, they train stuff like shortened range of motion or lengthened partials, which is at being able to do the bottom of the lifts, let's say a bicep curl at the bottom of the lift and only doing this much, right? And what that does is it builds up tendonitis in all of your tendons entirely, like your shoulders, your elbows, knees are a big one. Even in stuff like your hips, it can get really bad.
Wow. Wow. So I guess it's safe to say that a lot of bodybuilders have tendonitis in multiple areas.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they're hurting in all types of ways. Like Ronnie Coleman at the end of his career was on crutches. Like it's horrible. It's terrible, man. One key thing I'm sure you know with your wrist, like holding those like external barbells, our bodies aren't designed for that, and your wrist bends certain ways or whatever, and oftentimes you can be injurious to yourself if you don't do your research on how to do the exercises properly. And even if you do the exercises properly, as you're approaching failure, no matter what, your form will break down to a certain degree at least, right? And when that happens, then the wrist injury might come, then the elbow injury might come, then the shoulder injury might come. I'm using the upper body because half of them skip legs.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. Leg day. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have, I've studied a little bit of knee anatomy and stuff like that. And, because I did capoeira, I studied a lot of foot anatomy. Those are all very complex things. So definitely those are on my list to kind of study. But as of right now, I'm definitely going to keep looking at the wrist because, again, this is my problem area for probably, unfortunately, the next 2 months. But hey, just keep learning, right? You take injuries and you just learn. That's my philosophy.
One thing I learned about like I had really bad elbow tendonitis because I have like hyperextended elbows, right, that go past 180 degrees. One thing I actually learned from Alex Leonidas, the guy who's a bodybuilder, is that training the lengthened range of motion with more resistance or accommodating resistance, whereby the lengthened is harder than the shortened position, which is here, right? Shortened position, lengthened position, and you want it harder at the lengthened position. With say a resistance band, with say chains that low as you lower it will become easier, right? Having that accommodating resistance helps with those tendonitis injuries, especially training them at speed. And what do you think you do in martial arts? You punch with speed, you have accommodating resistance with bands. All of these things are injury prevention things, which is why, even though I think that bodybuilding, by virtue of just the sport, is a lower risk of injury, I think that the way people train it, and abuse steroids, of course, ends up with more risk of injury than, say, a lot of the fighting type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with both martial arts and anything bodybuilding related, there is still so much to learn from a PT angle, from just in general, uh, just sports medicine angle. So it is a really good field to get into, not just for making money, but if you're genuinely interested in how to make the human body better. And I that's why one of the reasons you're in this field. You're slowly getting into this field.
I'm trying. I'm trying. But you said you learned a lot about the knee ligament and the knee anatomy from doing capoeira. What about the knee have you learned?
So mostly about the foot, but yeah, the knee thing is kind of similar to what you just said. So my knee, it used to, not anymore, because I strengthened that final range there, but it used to hyperextend too. And so I had to actually use a band and get the strength back from that hyperextension point. So I was getting tendonitis on the knee too. And my tendonitis was actually caused by a slight strain. It was because some person was messing around with a heel hook and did it wrong and sort of twisted my knee in a weird way. So, but you know, it heals, but there's tendonitis, right? That's the thing. And so what I had to learn was at that, most people's knees don't go past this point, but mine does. So at this point, I had to use a band to strengthen those stabilizer muscles. So now that this point is much more strong, then the all the things that were inflamed and like reacting wrong could relax. So it was the weirdest thing. It's exactly what you said about the elbow and stuff like that. So yeah, my knee is like 99% fine now. Some days I might feel sensitivity there, but that's partly just because when there's an injury, you get more nerve lining there. You're just more conscious of there. So it's not necessarily that there's anything lingering. It's just I'm more conscious of that area. But yeah, I had to really kind of learn about just how to fix that tendonitis there. And then the real tendonitis was the foot, like I was telling you about capoeira, because you're not just barefoot, you're barefoot on wood, right? And so one of my doctors back then was like, how do you not get stress fractures? Well, the answer is your body's much stronger than you think. That's the thing. Like, we're taught nowadays, oh my God, you can never walk barefoot anymore. You can never A, B, and C. But like our ancestors walk barefoot everywhere. It's just, so like you can't use our modern lifestyle necessarily as the comparison, but it still doesn't mean you can just do barefoot on wood. Especially, it's not just barefoot on wood. There's a lot of impact, right? You're jumping around, you're in weird angles, your toes are hyperextending. So I had to learn so many foot exercises to strengthen my foot to get rid of tendonitis. And the thing about tendonitis is that if you're straining's the wrong word, but if you're overworking the foot muscles, the tendonitis might come back. So when I hurt my wrist, I started climbing stairs more. Like, we have some very beautiful kind of like 300 step stairs where I live. So it was a perfect workout. And then I was like, hey, I should do it barefoot. So like, imagine 300 stairs doing it 5 times up and down, right? That's probably not a good thing to start immediately, but I was like, I did capoeira, I can do it. And of course, by the 5th one, I got tendonitis. And I'm like, okay, that's natural, because I overworked these foot muscles to the point where, you know, they haven't been overworked like that for at least a year. So thank goodness, knowing what you know now about the foot anatomy, and then knowing, okay, there's a lot of tendons down there, but there's also a lot of muscles you can strengthen. How do you get the blood flow, et cetera, right? So I knew exactly the foot exercises to do. So that was one story. The other story, and I might have told Ryan this, but I don't know if I did. When I first got back into Muay Thai after taking a break from capoeira, I was testing a lot of capoeira kicks on the heavy bag. And that's kind of a mistake when you're not used to hitting the heavy bag, especially a lot of the capoeira kicks are kicking with the foot. So I threw the Meia Lua de Compasso, the half moon kick, right? And the half moon kick, so this bone right here is called the calcaneus. Calcaneus or calcaneus, I forgot how to pronounce it. But I hit the heavy bag with the calcaneus, and you know, my calcaneus wasn't conditioned. So it really got bruised, and it was swelling and everything. And then it's like, okay, well, study the foot. Okay, like, what happens? Well, there's a lot of fascia there, right? So how can you let it swell? Well, okay, roll out the fascia. The same exercise they have you do when you have plantar fasciitis, which is like, use something and roll out this fascia right here. That helped the swelling go down, because it loosened this fascia to the point where it could swell a little more. So like little things like that. It's just, thank goodness I had all those anatomy books when I hit that heavy back with the calcaneus, but man, that was not fun for a few days afterwards. That bone hurt so much. And fractures of the calcaneus can happen, by the way. Thank goodness, I'm not that uncareful, right? I'm not hitting like wood with my foot bone. So yeah, I'm telling you guys all this because if you study anatomy, it can help your training, whether for martial arts or bodybuilding. And a good update, since Ryan knows about this, I was having all this like head tension, weird like vertigo, anxiety stuff last year, and recently I sort of, just by studying anatomy, I made breakthroughs in that. We can rant about this too for a little bit, but like the modern medical system, just sometimes they're not equipped for what little things a person deals with. Like PTs, doctors just couldn't figure out where it was tight. Like I knew deep down at heart it was a muscle thing. It was something related to the muscles tight back here. So I had to study the anatomy myself to be like, oh, there's an area back here. It's called I'm sure you know this, the superior neutral line. It's an area back of the head, sort of where that bone that sticks out in the back of your head. Around there, there's a lot of connection points for the neck muscles. So one day I was getting these like tension headaches that was causing anxiety again. I was feeling back there and I was like, oh my God, it's tight back here. And I was like, and then I looked at my anatomy book. It's like, oh yeah, the insertion point is, like here.
It's tight.
It's like,
yeah.
I talked to my doctor about it, and she's a good doctor, but like I showed her here. And she's like, yeah, but it's just the occipital muscle. It's like, no, it's not. Yeah, surface-wise, it's just the occipital muscle, but the insertion point right here, there's a lot of insertions of all these muscles up here. And like, we don't think of it because we think our neck muscles maybe end here at the bottom of the head, but actually, it
continues all the way up.
Yeah, continues up until the superior neutral line. So like little things like that, it's like, I get it, and this is a medical system rant in itself, which we could totally get into, but our Western medicine's so specialized, right? Like even to see someone for the wrist, my PT couldn't do it. I had to see an OT, an occupational therapist. Like there's special therapists just for your hands. It's like, and I was like, oh, there's people over here, there's people over here. It's like our medical system is so specialized that like a lot of times people don't get the big picture. And my doctor's a DO, and theoretically DO should think about the big picture a little more. But my DO's, credit to her, when she doesn't know, she doesn't know, right? But like sometimes I want to talk about these things with her, and then she's just like, you got to go talk to the specialist. It's like, oh, this is why people get injured for years. This is why people have health problems for years. It's like they don't know who to go to for help. And I'll end with this joke. A guy was getting his tooth pulled, right? And then accidentally the dentist dropped the tooth and the guy swallowed it. So then he goes to the ear, nose, and throat doctor, and the ear, nose, and throat doctor's like, oh, it's in your stomach already. Okay, you got to go to the gastrointestinal whatever guy. So they go there, and it's like, oh no, it's already all the way down in your colon. You gotta see the specialist for the colon. So he goes, and then he goes to the colon. The guy's like, oh my God, there's a tooth in your You gotta get a dentist to pull it out.
You just go in a complete circle.
Yeah, but like that's how it feels like sometimes in Western medicine. Now, Eastern medicine a lot of times have that stereotype of like they're too holistic, they're too broad, so they come up with a lot of bullshito, right? Oh, your chi, your yin, all this is off. Here's a bunch of herbs, it'll cure you, right? So like, again, the theme of this talk is that you got to have balance, and I think Western medicine is not balanced enough. It's too specialized.
I 100% agree. Actually, in kinesiology, you have the two roadmaps. You can become an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. But I can definitely see where you would get too specialized. And they're thinking, how do I make more money? Are you willing to pay more for the specialist, or are you willing to pay more for the generalist, right? If you have a specific problem, you're going to be able to pay the specialist more, which is why those certifications take more time and more money, right? And I think that's just a product of people wanting to make more money in the competition. And bringing it back to the body standards, I think that Western medicine in particular is trying to not only specialize to specific people, like say obese people, right? But it tries to generalize to a competition and to an audience where it's too broad, right? And these specialists are trying to apply their principles to everyone because they want to make money off of them. And in that case, you might get, for example, underdiagnosed for diabetes, for example, because they're trying to apply the blood sugar levels of a 20-year-old to a 60-year-old. And the fact that they have to adjust it at all makes it so that the people who are older and might have the same sugar levels as a 20-year-old with diabetes, they get underdiagnosed, for example. It's just little things like that that add up, and it hurts the body image of modern day Western society.
Yeah, exactly. I have such a perfect follow for this, and as I said, I'm gonna try to take off my sweater because it's getting hot here. But a lot of people know this is, oh my god, it depends on where you hang out on YouTube, and inevitably, if you watch martial arts videos, you probably will get catered these videos. But there seems to be this thing where everyone thinks modern Western men have low T, right? And that is a perfect segue or perfect follow-up to what Rye is saying. A lot of times it's like they don't have the right standards to look at things. So like, let's say they're applying a specific arbitrary standard from a specific population or specific age range, and then suddenly everyone's like, oh, why is everyone low T? It's like, no, not everyone's low T. Now, granted, there are certain things in our Western world, whether through a diet or through some chemicals in our whatever, in our food, in our products, that could be slightly reducing the T levels in people, but like everyone's like, oh my god, low T, low T. That's become such an insult even. It's like, I think there's more things to worry about than that, that is.
Yeah. Exactly. And like one big contributing factor to having lower testosterone isn't any of that food or whatever. It's just being obese. If you're obese, then you have lower testosterone than you would if you were just a lean individual, right? And they'll try to prescribe to you all of these problems when the real solution is lose some body fat.
Yeah. I had a person I had to slowly kind of keep my distance because it's just, there's just certain things, his priorities, his vibe wasn't right. But, he was the type, to his credit, he got me into the semen retention nofap stuff. So, but the thing is, he was not paying attention with what he ate. So it's like, whatever T benefits you get from that, you're ruining all by drinking Cokes and like having a little belly looking all swollen, and for 2 years, I kept telling him, he had other issues too. He had other issues, but this was one of those things. It's like, why are you so into nofap if you're just going to waste all those efforts on being unhealthy eating wise? I told another friend yesterday, I'm like, dude, if you have to pick between like fapping once in a while and drinking Coke, fap once in a while. Coke will do way more damage to your body. And because he felt bad because he drank Coke once in like a very long time. And I told that friend, I'm like, it's okay, man. Like, it's all about balance, right? You don't want to be the other person. I'm not going to say his name, but it's just like so obsessed with no fap, but like doesn't care about his diet. Mm-hmm. So negative with other things, like always thinking negativity about like where dating is. It's like focus on other things, including your own health first. So I had to get that right out of the way because again, this conversation's all about balance. It's all about trying to question certain arbitrary standards, right? And this is another different reason to going back to relating it back to what Ryan said. Another thing that guy could have done better was just exercise more intelligently. Then your T levels would be high enough that you won't have to worry about once in a while fapping if you really feel like doing it,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because his exercise regimen was no cardio. It was just jujitsu and some calisthenics. So if you're not doing cardio, there's a lot of things bad about not doing cardio. Like, don't overdo cardio, especially as a fighter. Ryan knows. You don't want to, like, if you do too much cardio as a fighter, that actually is not good for you, right? But, like you got to do cardio, like, consistently. Don't overdo, but do cardio consistently. And that'll help your stress levels. It'll help your body fat levels. It'll help your T if you're worried about that.
Exactly, man. And all of these extreme lifestyles, like say the super tall runaway model, the super muscular bodybuilder, a lot of those times, those people with orthorexia or their unhealthy shift and focus on healthy things, right? Oftentimes, those people are covering up for their lack of discipline in a different area of their life. Maybe the runaway model doesn't train very smartly, or maybe the bodybuilder doesn't eat very smart, or maybe he uses steroids. A lot of these times, if you focus your brain too much on one aspect of health, then you're gonna eventually spill over and lack discipline in another aspect of your life. You know,
Yeah.
that's why balance is so important.
Yeah. I just
You
learned a
can
new
have
word. It's
everything,
called
just not all at
orthorexia.
once.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you. Sorry, but yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for teaching me that word, orthorexia. That's a really good word. That's like that describes so much of what a lot of these modern trends sometimes lead down to.
yeah, a lot of times they're obsessed with health too much to a degree that eventually you're gonna burn out, right? What will keep you the healthiest is something you can be consistent with day in and day out. Not something that you'll stay on for a month to look a certain way and then just give up for the rest of your life, or give up for another month and then be unhealthy for that month. And that yo-yo dieting kind of thing, whereby you say lose a bunch of weight and become skinny and look good for a summer, and then going back up, is more unhealthy than just staying at a something between those two for the entire time and being healthy the entire time, versus losing a bunch of weight and being unhealthily underweight and then gaining a bunch of weight and being unhealthily overweight. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. There's just that thing you just said. There's so much of modern lifestyle. I think about one person I know, and to his credit, he was a well-intentioned guy, but like he would not care too much about his diet, and then like twice a year for a month go paleo. And it's like those extremes are okay, but at the end of the day, I think it's better. Exactly what Ryan said. Don't yo-yo like that.
Yeah, find something you're consistent with, and then that'll carry on for the rest of your life, and you'll be healthy for the rest of your life instead of being healthy for twice a year.
Yeah, and I give Jordan Peterson credit for this kind of little analogy, and I use it in different ways. But I don't struggle too much with diet, thank goodness. But for those of people who are struggling with diet or working out, or whatever, think about small changes. Right? If you need to make a change, think about small changes. Jordan Peterson, in his book, one of his books that I read, he talked about there was a patient who was having all these issues. I think it was either diabetes related or something, and he just said, "Look, you look online, doctors will tell you, like, here's a list of 100 things to do. Like, just try one thing. Maybe if you like soda too much, try to put some diet whatever into, so like a diet Coke or a diet Sprite or whatever. Put that into and then slowly get off that, right?" And she did. She started drinking the diet version of the soda, which still isn't healthy. But hey, at least if you're dealing with diabetes, hey, that's better, right? And so like that helped her. And I was like, yeah, that's the perfect story just for many things in life. Okay, like what can you learn today that you can slowly implement that can become part of you? So like if you don't know how to squat, don't make that the end goal. I mean, that's a good end goal, but like, okay, what's an immediate goal? Okay, what can I do? Like, what can I do every day? Can I walk around the block a little bit more? Can I drink more water? That's my current goal, right? I don't drink enough water, especially when I get passionate about stuff. Like, I should have had a water here, but I don't drink water. So like, little things you can do. Exactly.
I brought it too.
Yeah. Yeah. So just little things.
Yeah, make
little
it
things.
easier for yourself. Yeah, I didn't learn that quite from Jordan Peterson. Now that you bring him up, I feel bad because my room is dirty and I need to clean my room. But I took this class, Kin 352. I actually have a textbook for it right here. But it's the psychology of physical activity. And when you look at the things that people say, people aren't motivated by, oh, I'm scared of being fat, or I'm scared of this, or I'm scared of that. That often doesn't make people change their behavior, at least not long term. What instead has them change their opinions is the perceived benefits and how easily, and perceived barriers to what they are doing, right? So how easy it is for them, right? If it's very far for me to go to the gym, if it's a 30-minute drive, I'm not going, right? Like even me, who has been doing this my entire life, if the gym is 30 minutes away, I'm probably not going to drive 30 minutes just to go to the gym. Versus if I have access easily to exercise, let's say I know some calisthenics, right? I can do that day in and day out because it's right on the floor. It's there for me every single day, right? And if it's something easy, for example, your idea with the dietary thing, which is change out a soda for a diet soda, right? Then it's way easier and the perceived barriers are way less because you don't have to change as much with your diet or your exercise routine. Going on just a 5 minute walk every single day, if you're not exercising at all, it can make a huge difference in your level of physical activity.
Yeah, exactly. And for those of you who like that soda analogy that Jordan Peterson gave, an even better one I always tell people, and this is actually something I told the person that I was mentioning earlier who just, couldn't control his eating but was all about no fap. I was like, okay, instead of getting a soda, first of all, they'll overcharge you if you get it at a restaurant. If you have to, get sparkling water, or like if you're really craving something at the store, get kombucha or something. Like kombucha has health benefits, but you don't want to drink too much of it either because a lot of kombuchas have a lot of sugar in it too, right? But like these little substitutions, like be creative. Exactly like Ryan said, I love that word barrier to change. If you can find things that make the barrier is very low, and we're all creative people. If you're creative, you can find it. It's like, oh, and yeah. As you can tell, there's a lot to discuss about these things.
Yeah, and the other thing is not just barriers, perceived barriers, is the difference in wording. And the reason being is one of the biggest perceived barriers is lack of time, for example. And sure, some people work 24 hours a day and they literally don't have the time to do it. But most of the time when people says, "Oh, I don't have enough time," they do have 5 minutes per day to go on a walk. They do have 5 minutes to go down on the ground and do a couple push-ups, right? They just perceive it as a barrier. And if you can change your mindset just slightly, then you can lower the amount of barriers you have to exercise. If you can change what your environment is, if you can move the treadmill closer to your TV, if you can give yourself a standing desk, then the perceived barriers get even lower and lower and lower, and you're more and more likely to do the exercise.
Yeah, exactly. I will be right back. Right, I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. But this is a great discussion. Shout out everyone that's watching, whether now or later. But see what I just did, guys. That's a perfect example. Like, how do I correct the thing where I don't drink enough water? Well, I could have had that was a perceived barrier. It's like, oh my god, if I went and ran and drank water, I would have wasted all this time, and then time is precious. It's like, yeah, but that was only maybe at most 20 seconds. Like people can wait 20 seconds, and Ryan will have other things to do for 20 seconds, and then I'm hydrating, because I don't hydrate enough. It's like my biggest issue. I got a lot of issues, but I don't hydrate enough. It's so, like, that's exactly an example of a perceived barrier. It's like, like when I'm doing work, oh my God, if I go drink water, I'm going to lose my train of thought, right? That's a perceived barrier. No, you're not going to lose your train of thought, or find another solution. No cards, write your train of thought down and then go get some water.
Yeah, exactly. Or for example, like, making it easier for you so the barrier is even less. I just have a pack of water right next to where I work, so I can, if I just need water, I can just reach down and grab water.
Yeah, and that's what I'm probably going to do. I love that idea, right? I'll probably just buy a pack of water, just put it right here. I really like that idea.
Yeah. It's just very easy of access. And then another thing is, if you want something to be harder for you, let's say you love soda, right, or you love a certain snack, right, you can make the perceived barriers higher by putting it like high up on the shelf, and you have to get a chair. Well, for me, I have to get a chair to reach the top shelf, but for most people, I'm sure they don't. But in any case, you can just put it somewhere where it's harder to reach, and in that case, the perceived barriers are higher, and you're less likely to do it.
Yeah. And talking about people who gamify it, there's people who they'll turn it into a game, like almost like an investment game where they set themselves a goal. Let's say I don't want to do this bad habit. And if I can delay the gratification enough, whatever money I invest will accrue some kind of interest and it will pay off. But how a lot of these websites, these services make money is most people can't delay the gratification. So like the second part to it is there's a penalty. If you can't delay the gratification, you have to pay out the money, right? So again, that's a more risky thing to do. And I'm not saying people do it, but did you see how people try to hack their brains, hack their minds to be healthier?
Yeah, there's loads of ways to condition your brain to be like, I need to eat something healthy, or I need to eat something this, because in today's day and age where everyone has short-term attention spans, everybody wants gratification now instead of having a long-form thing, then it's easier to gamify it and make it short-term rather than having to see the long-term benefits right now.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that happens a lot, and the jiu-jitsu friend that I brought on back in the day who we talked about this, sometimes unfortunately, and I'm definitely a person that does this, you use kind of your, almost you could use PTSD, but that's the wrong word, but you use the things that have happened and affect you negatively as the stepping stone, right? And, there is good to that. For example, I hurt my knee back in the day. So, okay, I know about the knee. I had foot problems. So I know about the foot. Now I'm learning a lot about the wrist and stuff like that. But, there's a reactive element to it. And it's like, how do you train your body to be proactive about it, right? That's where, for example, we consult, whether it's like we look at, okay, what is the perceived healthy or what are the experts saying? So turning it full circle, that's why these discussions that Ryan and I are having are so important, because we don't want to just be reactive like a lot of times I am, I learned about the neck because I hurt my neck, people have told me years before that, hey, Jerry, your neck's thin, you pencil neck, people said that, but I was like, you just hate it, but then, if you want to do martial arts, you got to train your neck, right? So little things like that. And it's like, okay, so if you don't want to be reactive, you're going to go seek out the information, and unfortunately or unfortunately, depending on the circumstance, sometimes we'll look at who's trending, whether in the fitness world or in the fighting world or in the medical world. And the whole point of this discussion is that you still have to take that with a grain of salt. That is still not always the right thing.
Yeah, in the same spirit as the proactive versus reactive idea, I prefer to, instead of rehabbing my thing, I would prefer prehab, right? I would prefer strengthening my body before it gets injured instead of having to rehab it after it gets injured. What's that saying? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or something like that, right? I'd rather have it prevented than have it and then have to rehab it, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And shout out Hispanic Jerry. He told me that his dad, when his dad was younger, trained his wrists constantly. And his dad was telling him for years to do it, and he never did it. And I hope by my hurting my wrist, I was backing his dad up yesterday. I was like, yeah, well, now you have two examples. Train your wrist now. So prehab it. So you don't end up with a wrist injury like Jared. Because like basically, if you guys have hammers, you can train, this is called supination. You can train your supination and your pronation. The way to remember is supination has the word up in it. Supination. So like if you have a hammer, you can train, basically you hold the hammer and then you can train these muscles, these twisting muscles, because those muscles get hurt a lot. That's what I hurt. So that's a perfect example. I told Hispanic Jerry, I even showed him how to do it with the hammer with my good wrist. I was like, learn these now, Hispanic Jerry, so you don't hurt your wrist accidentally.
Yeah, your forearm muscles have a supinator and pronator in them, actually, too. And, like, the weird thing, like, the arm wrestlers, right, we have this, like, big muscle here. That's the pronator teres that happens when you turn over. You have that pronator. And I found, number one, it trains my forearms and makes my forearms bigger. So, sure, it's good for bodybuilding in that respect. But also, it's good for injury prevention, right? Because if you are good at turning over your wrist so often, then you are going to be strong in that respect. Versus if you're trying to finish a submission, like an armbar or whatever, you're trying to grab the arm and twist it, right? And using that pronation, I'd rather be strong at that position first, prehab it, so that I am strong in all ranges of motion here, rather than trying to force it with an armbar against a resisting opponent and then I get injured, right?
Yeah.
In the same respect, it's good to look at not only just fighters, not only just bodybuilders. It's good to look at every aspect of every different art, so that you can take something from everybody. Like the arm wrestlers, for example, they always have elbow tendonitis, so they're very good at preventing elbow tendonitis because they have to train in a way that keeps them healthy so that they can continue to arm wrestle, right? And in addition to that, the pronation and supination thing that you said, right? I think that's amazing because one, the gravity at this point is going to be stronger than at this point because it's at an angle and some of the weight is going through your hand versus here all of the weight is going straight down, right? And that's just physics. A cool thing for supination and pronation, you can actually use a martial arts belt. I don't know if I have one near me, or even like a backpack, right? And you can use the weight here, and you can put weight into it or attach weight to a martial arts belt, and you can turn it like so, and that's pronation. And you can do the reverse supination this way, right? And that's just an easy way to train it. I actually learned that from the arm wrestles too. Mm-hmm.
Wow, exactly. So guys, we gave you a lot of ways to train those muscles, man, because it's important. It's just, you don't realize how much you can't do until your wrist is hurt. And I was born left-handed, right? So I learned to write right-handed. That's another thing that a lot of East Asian cultures do. They'll switch you over to right hand. But like everything else I did with my left hand. So I just always thought of myself as right-handed, even though I'm technically left-handed. Now that my left hand is hurt, oh my God, dude, I didn't realize how much I can't do. It's so weird. I had to learn to do a lot of stuff that I thought I did with my right hand, but I actually did with my left hand. So it's like, it really sucks because chances are most people, when they hurt their wrist, they're going to hurt their dominant hand, right? So like basically what I'm experiencing is like what I thought was my non-dominant, but it's actually basically my semi-dominant hand getting hurt. So like my quality of life has sucked. I mean, that's why if you look, Jerry's lost some weight. Like I'm not depressed, but I've been pretty sad. So
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry about that, brother. You know what's funny though? I'm also naturally left-handed, and I got forced to use with my right hand, and I actually injured both wrists at the same time, but my left was worse. So it hurt way more. Having the left hurt more than the right hurting more. I would have so much preferred my right would got injured more, but now, like, everything in this world is right-handed. Like, if you use a dishwasher, you clean dishes by hand, it's for right-handed people. Like, it kind of forces you to be more ambidextrous if you are left-handed, naturally.
how did you hurt your wrist, if you don't mind me asking?
Bike. Falling off a bike.
Oh, okay. You told me about it. It was that big injury.
Yeah, that one was horrible, man. But I could have learned from that, and I did learn from that. For example, learning how to brake fall, learning how to roll, right? Yeah, I fell off a bike again, lo and behold, and I just rolled through. And it hurt. I got tire and tread marks all over me, but I didn't hurt my wrists again. So.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Let me think. Is there anything else I wanted to cover that I haven't covered yet? Anything else you want to talk about? Or you want to cover?
I think we got touched everything.
Cool. So, guys, this was a really good discussion. Again, I knew Ryan and I could talk, and honestly, if we had more topics prepared, we could probably talk for another hour about this, but it is a good stopping point now. We covered a lot of good things. Again, guys, just to encourage all of you, keep learning because this is the body you have, right? And the beauty of martial arts, the beauty of bodybuilding, working out, whatever, anything physical is you realize your body is strong, but it's also weak. That's that thing about the human body. It's both strong and weak. So you have to understand how to make the weak parts stronger, and then like how to also build the stronger parts too. It's a never-ending process, and injuries suck, but you can learn from that too. And then when your body's doing a lot of good things, also you can learn a lot from that too. So I hope to just keep encouraging everyone. And Ryan, if you ever want to talk more about this stuff again, I'm always game to talk about this stuff. Like, this stuff is so interesting. And I was joking to my friend Dr. Alex that maybe when I have a quarter life or half life crisis in my 40s, that's when I go to med school, or I'll study kinesiology too, like Ryan.
That'd be awesome, man. That'd be
Yeah.
awesome. I know all the professors, they'd love you, man. Thank you for having me, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, Ryan will be back, and very likely I will go to Arizona to check out the Sandan match. Now, and Ryan, we can talk about this afterwards too. I have a feeling because there is a delay in this conversation, unfortunately, because of the live stream. But I'll try to end the live stream. Maybe I'll ask you more about this. But yeah, I'll have some questions about the Sandan thing after we talk. But yeah, guys, this was Ryan. He'll be back, and actually, I will make sure to pin your channel too when
thank you.
when this goes live. Yeah, because Ryan, I know you've been uploading a little more, so
A little bit, yeah.
yeah. Okay, guys, this was Fight Commentary Chats, Fight Commentary Breakdowns, Jerry and Ryan.